My name is Ted Finch. I'm the president and owner of Chanimal.com, and in the next few minutes, as fast as I can move through this material, I'll be explaining how to create killer alliances that help you dominate your market. First of all, I'm going to go through a little bit of the background, a couple of takeaways is why I set up these alliances, the acid test for the alliances. We want to talk about the best type of alliances and ways to really leverage the alliances to get money. So we've got a lot of material that I'm going to be covering, so let's get crashing. One thing that you'll notice that these slides have a lot of density. I had one person in one of the forums complaining about it. Most people thought it was fantastic because you can actually take this material afterwards and train the rest of your team members that weren't able to prepare, to be at this particular meeting. So I do go through everything fairly quickly, but you will get copies of the PowerPoint. You'll also get a copy of the Complete Alliance Kit afterwards. It's also being recorded, and when I can finally get to it, I'm actually going to convert this to a video and post it up much like I did the recent How to Build a Reseller Channel presentation. Okay, my background, in my particular case, I've been a VP of Marketing at Goldmine, VP at Harcourt, at Senior Vice President at Motorola, over marketing at General Electric, and then the main thing is I've consulted with over 270 different companies on building the reseller channels. One of the reasons why I concentrate also on alliances is because it's the number one way that I get resellers is when we hook up with different companies. We can actually get their reseller base really quickly if we form an alliance with them first. So I use it specifically to help build channels, but at the same time you'll also see additional ways that you can leverage alliances fairly quickly. These are some of the companies I've worked with. Most of you can recognize these different organizations. Okay, first thing I want to do is let's go ahead and define what alliances are, because I seem to get a little confusion when I talk about an alliance. Even a reseller program is an alliance. It's essentially anyone that can help you to meet your objectives. So, for example, sometimes I work with different associations, organizations. Software CEO, for example, I sat on the marketing board of advisors, and so that's an alliance. Also, I've been involved in different user groups, birds of a feather, and of course within LinkedIn, I'm maxed out on all the number of groups that I can even join. Plus, sometimes I've been involved in standard committees where I formed alliances with different companies, even though we were competitors. So, for example, when it came to set-top configuration, Blu-ray configuration, these are some of the things I've been involved in, even on helping to set the standards in the industry, of which we have to form different coalitions and groups to see if we can standardize to help the entire industry move forward. Okay, some types of alliances can be progressive, so meaning they start off as non-competing companies. Eventually some of those companies start to decide, gosh, our products work really well together. Why don't I start to sell your product? Sometimes they turn in where you just form a link, put a link on each other's websites. Some of those start off fairly informal, and then they eventually reach a degree of formality. Also, there's resellers or integrators. These are also very formal alliances. They make a margin. Then there's even OEM deals, and these are alliances a lot of times that suddenly they realize, gosh, I would be doing much better if I actually just incorporated your product into mine, and so they become OEM deals. Okay, why set up alliances? It was really interesting. I lived in North Carolina when Hurricane Fran came over the top of it, and I noticed in my front yard that every tree that was standing alone had broken and fallen over. Yet on the side of my house I had a clump of trees. And these trees, their roots were intertwined, their branches were intertwined, and not a single one of those trees broke. So this is actually very similar to the type of relationships we can have, that if we tie ourselves in with enough other companies, we find that it's actually a defensive strategy. For example, at General Electric, General Electric, I was within one of the groups that dealt with security, software and hardware. So we had 22 formal alliances with companies, so much so that there were only a certain number of projectors, a certain number of DVRs that we would actually work with. And so if someone was unhappy with our software, and if one of our competitors tried to come in and take us out, they would quite literally have to rip apart most of the building to rip out all of the other hardware that was built in if they also did not work with those same vendors. So it's a great defensive strategy. In addition, it's a proactive strategy. So we look at operating systems. Specifically right now, the one I'll look at is the iPhone and the Google OS, where they get developers to support their platform. Then these are alliances that help to build the platform out. We look at the old ones like Palm and BlackBerry, and they just lost a lot of their developer base, or they didn't build it up strong enough. Some of the earlier days when I launched OS2 and Warp for IBM, if they didn't have enough companies that would write to the platform, then their product would not take off, which is obviously the case. So these are very proactive strategies. And then we even see certain software platforms like Salesforce. Even when I was with Goldmine Software, we formed alliances with other companies to develop applications that would patch into Goldmine. And as a result, if somebody had a certain number of applications built already and they'd already paid for those, again, it was both proactive in our case because it gave people ability to expand quickly, and it was also defensive because it also meant that it would be harder for someone to leave our platform if they had a lot already invested in it. Okay, it's also part of a build, buy, or align strategy. So it fills holes in your product roadmap. For example, for video editing, I use Sony Vegas. Now, I noticed that their rendering engine is the same one that Adobe, Avid, and others. So these rendering engines are very specialized. It's very difficult for them just to develop the rendering engine, let alone the rest of the package. So they form an alliance to supplement a hole in their product launch. And even in the old days with Windows XP, one of the companies that I knew, one of my brother-in-law worked for Hillgrave, and Hillgrave was built into Windows as their terminal application. So it was a very specialized component of Windows that they would rather not develop themselves and maintain. So they just formed an alliance with another company, which eventually turned into an OEM deal for that same company. Also, sometimes we find complements to our product. It fills holes in our end-to-end offer. Like at Motorola, for example, we needed the other components to have value. So even if we provided the set-top box or even the semiconductors for the set-top box, we still needed head-end equipment, fiber optics. We needed content from aggregators like Disney content and all the different publishers of content, and even games. So these were all companies that we needed to be able to make our product value proposition pull through. Okay, the other part is why set it up. The product management. So here's different groups. Complete holes in your product roadmap, the bundles, the cross promotions, sales. One of my primary reasons for forming alliances when I'm not a VP of marketing for a company, but when I'm consulting from a channel perspective, is because the first thing I do when I form the alliance is I want their resellers. And if I can't get their resellers directly, then I at least want them to be able to promote my product to their resellers. And then we can also cross-train our sales teams. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes. And also within marketing communications, joint events, direct mail, banners, all kinds of stuff. I'll show you some stuff that I did with Dell before that was really effective. Also the CEO and CFO, they also find that they become an acquisition target. At one of my companies I stepped into, as a matter of fact, all 5 of the companies that I was acquired through first formed alliances with those other companies. And then when those other companies realized that the company I was at filled a hole in their product roadmap, they actually found out it was cheaper just to buy us. So from a CEO, CFO side, that's one of the areas that would really be effective, even from looking at potentially getting your company acquired. So now I'm going to go through a couple different case studies and show you creative examples of how these alliances have been effective. So the first over here is like with Lotus. I was launching 123 in freelance and Lotus Smart Suite, and it was interesting when Microsoft came out, they changed the entire landscape. But a lot of that Smart Suite was put together from a national roadshow that I was running. I was launching Lotus 123 for Windows. I was also launching a Me Pro and Approach, 2 other products. We got those vendors together, and Lotus acquired the companies and formed Lotus Smart Suite. So at least it was a decent run for a while. Then it was successfully acquired by IBM. So their job was over. Then it was IBM's job to sort of pick up the pieces. Now the other example here is Goldmine Software. So here it was Microsoft Outlook, this is a few years ago, was being released for free, which meant the PIM section of the contact management market was going to dry up. It's hard to compete with free. So when I launched Netscape Navigator and Microsoft came out with a free browser, it was very difficult for us to sell that product at $39.95 a piece when suddenly we were competing with free. But in this particular case, Goldmine had to move up the food chain to the Salesforce automation. But they didn't have all the features set. They also didn't integrate completely. And they also didn't even have the right kind of resellers who can integrate the product. So what we did is we had 2 channel marketing managers. We took one of them, turned him into an alliance manager, and immediately struck out there to form partnerships. And to align the partners, one of the things we did is we decided to do a national roadshow, Salesforce Automation Roadshow. And with this roadshow, we would be the ones sponsoring the event, and then we would get Microsoft because of their service software, Compaq because of their server, ESRI because of they had a sexy application where you can draw a circle on a map, press a button, and it would create a group within Goldmine, and then US Robotics for remote synchronization, of the database. So these were developers, these were other companies that we partnered with. We went on the National Roadshow to 13 cities, started with 3, and eventually grew that thing out to 26 cities. So from a channel standpoint, we ended up recruiting over 800 new VARs, and we actually topped out at over 2,300 resellers that had picked this up, including over 50 new development partners writing for the Goldmine using that as a platform. So the revenues increased, the company was successfully acquired, and of course now it's known as FrontRaise Solutions. And then it's been promptly killed by Salesforce, who formed even more alliances, kept that moving forward, even with their Force platform, where people started to support the platform itself. Another example in a whole different industry, so you can sort of see how this applies, we go back and forth, was HRW. This was an educational publisher. It was part of $4 billion Harcourt that owned General Cinemas, Neiman Marcus, SeaWorld, but also a dominant play, over 72% market share within their reading and writing textbooks, and about 56% in their math. So the problem we ran into when I was with the company is we had a multimedia course, and that required 5 PCs per classroom. Well, if you're a textbook publisher, you don't want to get into providing PCs. So it was one of the first time that they didn't have the end-to-end product just to be able to sell their own. So the product was not taking off as expected. So I called Kevin Rollins, who was a friend of mine and happened to have been the CEO of Dell at the time. And what we did is I asked him who his alliance managers were. He put me in charge with somebody. The first thing they asked me is they said, okay, but I have to find out whether or not we could make more money with you than without you. So there was one of the acid tests for an effective alliance. So we went through and explained to them that in the educational market, the publishers are king and the PCs are secondary. And so we can move them into more locations. So we then showed them what we would do is then we set up the arrangement. So we would go in there, we'd set the appointment, we'd ask them to come with us. We'd present our multimedia course, of which the teachers loved it, but then they couldn't figure out how to get the 5 PCs in the classroom. So then we would turn it over to John to present Dell computers and how their financing approach would help the school to be able to get the PCs in the classroom. So we continued forming alliances, not only with Dell, it was very effective, and by the way, we ended up putting their computers that were compatible with our software in over 200,000 catalogs that went out throughout all the schools, so that was their benefit. In their case, they also had an educational arm, and their salespeople were starting to promote our product because hardware without supporting software has no value. It's just a paperweight. We also formed alliances with Smithsonian for their ancient history content. We formed an alliance with CNN for the current event content, the National Association of Science Teachers, okay, and all of these right here, so that we eventually created a website with over 20,000 pages of content. And now when you even look at my area in Austin, Texas, from middle school all the way up through high school, our students are using this kind of electronic content through their iPads because they don't even have textbooks anymore. And so this whole strategy as an educational publisher helped the company to kickstart and make sure that they were not left in the dark ages when the market dynamics started to change. So the result, the alliances completed, enhanced the product offering. They actually started selling the multimedia product. We had a massive competitive advantage, And so much so that some of the things we were doing caught the attention even of the Secretary of Education, Riley, who then spoke on our stage at the National Science Trade Show. And the press on that was tremendous. So all of these were benefits of forming that particular alliance. Okay, now let's explain another one. Let's get a little bit more technical. How about development tools? So I was at Metrowerks with Codeware Development Tools. Stock was an all-time low. The CEO knew that he needed to get that stock value up. But one of the things we looked at is we thought, well, let's start forming additional alliances so we have other companies starting to promote our software. So we formed an alliance with Motorola. It was interesting as we started getting closer with them, we realized that the difference in time from the time that their software development tools was released and the time that their chips were released was on an average, a 6-month delta. So they'd been sitting on all of this product for 6 months before anyone could develop anything for it. So we came in there and essentially said, gosh, why don't you acquire us for $100 million and you will save $400 million your first year. It was the fastest acquisition that I had ever gone through, as Motorola realized, good grief, this makes a lot of sense for us. And so the CEO, he didn't lose his job. Matter of fact, he got promoted to a venture capitalist with his $10 million in cash that he acquired as part of the acquisition. Okay, at Motorola, so then I was acquired by Motorola. I stepped in. I ended up being the director for one of the divisions, but also sat on the marketing board in the semiconductor sector, the $9 billion semiconductor sector. And one of the groups that I was helping was the semiconductor. And it was interesting in their particular case because if they did not have an end-to-end product, then they could not sell any set-top boxes. So we reassigned some of the team members to strike out and form alliances with the content providers to support the platform, network providers, head and equipment, created a business model, and then we started winning the earlier deployments, and then we actually won a $1.3 billion deal as a result of this. Unfortunately, that's right when the economy collapsed, so they had to unwind it, but it was part of the reason for our success was the fact that we set up all of these alliances because we could not provide all of those end-to-end pieces at Motorola. Now, another company that I worked for as a vice president at General Electric, and it was interesting with GE, their mandate typically is to dominate with the first or second position in the market, or they shut the division or the group down. So in our particular case, we wanted to form a middleware application because even though we provided the software and some of the hardware, it was very difficult for us to continually add other hardware pieces because of all the development time to write the drivers. But if we created a middleware application, much like Windows, for the security space, then everyone else would write their own drivers to support the middleware application. And then we ended up being able to support a lot more hardware. And with a strong name like GE, which was the 5th strongest brand in the world, our brand could dominate the category if we could get rid of the expense of all of this development work. So we started pulling in alliances to support this middleware. We lined up 22 different alliance partners, and this provided the credibility and the record sales for the division. The division president was promoted, moved right back here to Austin, and the two of us have maintained a close friendship. But it was the alliances that helped us supporting a platform and a middleware application, much like in the old days. If you remember the old DOS, when you looked at a package on the shelf, you had to see whether or not it supported your printer because all the printer drivers had to be written separately. When Windows came out, everybody wrote it to Windows as a middleware application. And then so long as your software worked with Windows, then every printer that was supported by Windows suddenly worked with your printer. So it was a similar concept here, and that's another example of creating either an OS or a middleware application, getting the industry to support it, forming the alliances around it, and that helps you to sort of overall move forward in your category. So it filled a hole in the product roadmap. Another case study was singing software. So I was engaged to help this particular company that made a product called Singing Coach get their product out there. And if you're trying to promote, when you look at market segmentation, one of the 5 different tests is whether or not you can reach your market. So I looked at that market and I thought, how are we going to find people who are trying to learn how to sing? there was only one major publication out there that was for singers, and it was American Idol. And it was one of the most expensive ads I had ever seen. And so I thought, gosh, how are we going to reach these people? So one way to do this is singers also use pianos. They use keyboards. They use guitars. They use microphones. Well, why don't we form an alliance with these people? And so imagine if there's a microphone from Panasonic on the shelf. It's a $49 microphone with $49 worth of free software. And all it costs them is a sticker. So it's like 1/50th of a cent to put that sticker on there. And then once we form the alliance and they get it into the development cycle, they could just put the coupon right on the packaging itself, so it doesn't cost them any more than the ink. And as a result, they have $50 advantage over their competitors by throwing this software in with it. Or imagine a keyboard, and the keyboard includes a CD that will help people to learn how to sing. So again, every competitive advantage that other companies may need, but for us, we ended up with a distribution. And we found a way to reach those people that were trying to learn how to sing. We also then formed alliances with different associations, like the National Association of Singing Teachers, National Association of Teachers, piano teachers, and teacher referral services. We even set up a board for teacher referral services. But all of these were different type of creative alliances to generate an increase in our own sales. Okay, and even at Chanimal.com, I work with several other different consultants, but at the same time, I have alliances for international work. A lot of times I'll check with the York group. If I need PR help, I'll check with the Peters group. If I need industry content, I check with Softletter and my friend, over there. So I have all these different alliances so that I can provide everything that a corporation needs to move their product forward and build their channels. So I eat my own dog food. It's called Chanimal brand. So when to set up the alliances? Okay, you want to expand your reseller channel? That's what I use it for. You want to fill holes in your product roadmap? That's what I've used when I was a vice president at these other corporations. You want to step into these sales opportunities, fend off these competitive attacks, again, defensive positioning. You want to disrupt your competitor's supply chain. We've actually gone in and bought one of our competitors' distributors, and then we shut them down as a ways to bring them to the table so that we could acquire them as part of our acquisition strategy. And so also get new leads into new markets, free PR because you can announce it. Plus, your product is better with theirs, their product is better with yours. And so you increase your overall credibility just by the very association. Now, the other thing is sometimes I work with startups, not sometimes, I work with a lot of startups or even mid-sized companies, and they're intimidated to contact a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They think that they, might not be able to get through to an Oracle or something else. But you have to understand that the big companies actually need the smaller companies. So if you're a big company, you need to start forming alliances. If you're a small company, you need to form alliances with some of the big companies. The reason is a lot of times these companies are managed by HR, which means even at Motorola, I had a budget. So I had maybe millions of dollars in my budget, but I didn't have people. I could not, for the life of me, get a head count. So if I form an alliance with a smaller company, then they can provide the labor, they can provide the initiative, and I can provide the money. So remember that roadshow that I mentioned about with Goldmine Software? Well, on that roadshow, we charged each of our vendors $2,500 per location to participate. Well, it costs $8,000 per location. So you can see that we ended up with 4 vendors. We got $10,000 per location. It costs us $8,000. We actually made $2,000. That covered the cost of the intern, the cost of the alliance manager, or the person that was running this, the cost for the direct mail, the cost for flying out to the locations for the road shows, everything fully burdened was $8,000. We made $10,000. We made money on our recruiting effort. All we had to do is cash flow it. From the time that we did the event and the time that their accounting departments actually paid us. So it was phenomenal, great use of being able to roll the product out there. At the same time, those other companies, they would have had to pay $8,000 themselves to do it, and they didn't have the resources to put it all together. They needed manpower. We were the manpower. They were the budget. So the sponsor gets a free ride and it's paid for by the larger companies. So how formal? Well, usually the difference of success is usually determined by how formal or informal the relationships are. I prefer to set up very formalized relationships because I find that they're much more proactive. I've seen some casual relationships, those work in the marketplace, but I usually try to aim those and turn those into much more formal relationships, of which the Chanimal Alliance Kit is material that I created over the years, and then I compiled it into a complete kit that can be used for formal or informal, but it contains sort of everything that you need. It's like an alliance program in a box, or in this case it's a zip file. In this case it's actually 2 zip files because it's over 10 megabytes worth of content. So now what do? So now you can see some of the benefits of why to set it up. You can see some of the results. Now it's the how part. How are you going to set up these alliances? And in some cases save your job, because some of these alliances have been the difference between the company failing and succeeding. So there's 3 steps. Number 1 is set up the alliance program. Just use the alliance kit. Follow all the instructions. It's sort of like alliance by the numbers. Recruit your alliances and then leverage your alliances. And now I'm going to go through each of these different pieces. First, the alliance kit, stuff that it has. It has an introduction, sort of a README file. It's got a plan of action. This plan of action is essentially the excruciatingly detailed steps that I use for everything. You want to set up a roadshow? It's there. You want to know every phase of how you set this up? It's all in there in a Gantt chart that shows you exactly how to, from top to bottom, how to get this stuff done. It's got an Alliance Worksheet. You just open up the spreadsheet. It's got instructions. It's got 3 different tabs, 4 tabs including the instructions. And it shows you every little piece. Fill this out. Complete this. Prioritize this. And when you're through, you'll be setting up an alliance program that's world class. It even includes sample meeting agendas, a pick list, a generic NDA, everything included as part of this material. Now I'm actually going to go through some of those. But before, let's talk about who should actually initiate and set these alliances up. So let's say, for example, you're the alliance manager with a small company. If you're contacting another small company, it's typically going to be the president. Otherwise, it's sales, marketing, product management. But in the larger companies, sometimes you're going to find it's the alliance manager. They've got a dedicated alliance manager, like at Dell. Sometimes it's the person with the business development titles, because you've got to sort your way through the corporations to figure out who it is who actually does this. And if anything, go to the product manager, because the product manager knows what holes they've got in their product line, and they're the ones that are they're paid to fill the holes. They're hole fillers. Okay, so here's how to get the bandwidth to do this. So I assume, unless you're a full-time alliance manager, let's say you're a business development guy and alliance is on the side, or you're marketing VP or a small company, how do you get the bandwidth to set all this stuff up? To define your program, research and find the best alliances, find and contact the right people. I mean, it's legwork. It's not difficult when you follow the step-by-step instructions, but it is time-consuming. So where do you get the time? You're talking to the intern king. My secret weapon is interns. So when I launched Netscape, I did that with like 7 full-time people and 9 interns. These weren't normal interns. I mean, I had a Rhodes Scholar. I had some pretty sharp people. Some of these interns went off to form their own companies. Some of these are heading up the sales and marketing at other companies. Red Hat. I won't mention some of the Red Hat, some of the other companies, IQ Tech Pros, or some of the other companies, 20,000 people and everything else. These were interns that worked with me. And so the benefits, they're inexpensive. I got to change this. It says $8 an hour. I think the minimum wage now is 10, so it's got to be $10 an hour. They're highly motivated. They want to do real marketing. These are not go get my coffee people. These are people that if you can give them the directions, they're going to go there. So like in my time, just so you can realize sort of how it's highly leveraged, I average 1 to 2 hours of my time per 10 hours of an intern's. And then they have their own life, set up a $30 per month Vonage call for phone calls. I have these people working all over the world. I used to use Vonage. Now I use Vonage or I use Skype. And all I have to do is pay for a microphone, and Skype's got a program. It's like $4.90 a month. So it's really, really cheap to outfit them. They've already got their laptops. I mean, that's what they do their homework on. They've already got an internet connection, or they can't even do their homework. But the key on this is you have to have a detailed plan of action, which is why I provide it. So I give you the plan of action, and it just shows them. You just turn them loose and say, just follow this information here, and the end result. You give them samples, which all the samples are part of the Chanimal Alliance Kit, and you've got everything to be able to strike out very strategic, powerful alliances that could make the difference between failure or success in your entire company. Okay, now here's a sample of that Chanimal Alliance plan of action. So it says, like up here, use the Chanimal Alliance, identify potential alliances, identify the top 5 market segments, identify the major complementary non-competitive products and companies in each segment, determine the business case, prioritize into alliances, top 10, top 25, self-serve, create alliance policies. So the alliance policies, for you, it's not a big deal, but for the big companies like General Electric, I was having companies call me just about every week. Some company would call up asking to form an alliance. And so you've got to have some policies on which type of alliances if you've got an alliance manager. If not, then you're just happy to even have somebody talk to you. And then here's the recruiting stage. So here's the Alliance Kit, how to set up all of those, all of the elements, the non-disclosure or logo usage guideline, high-level roadmap, calendar of events for cross-promotions. It's all in here. I mean, this is exactly how I've set up over 100 alliances. And these alliances have been worth billions of dollars. And then even personally, a truckload of cash every time that I got acquired. I seem to have done okay with the deal. And then the recruiting stage, so it shows all the instructions. And then if you want, I've got this a PDF. If you want, let me know, and I'll send it to you as a Microsoft project file. And then you just plug it in here, and it'll even pace out how fast you're going to be able to get this thing knocked out. Here's some of the other components of that. And so, again, interns must have a detailed plan. So it's the old caveman model. Alliances so detailed. Even an intern can do it. Okay, the time frames. Well, it depends on your bandwidth. Assume an intern. So here's my time frame with an intern or somebody internally that's dedicated. If not, just take your time and divide it out. If someone's working 40 hours a week, then this is the time frame. So it usually takes 1 to 2 weeks to repurpose the Chanimal Alliance Kit, which means swap out the word Chanimal with your company name, identify the categories, the prospect, find all the contacts. That's the biggest job. It's just finding the contacts. And then recruiting, allow about a month to find the priority contacts, set your appointments, get those initial meetings, lock them up. And then leverage those as ongoing. But most of the time you're going to get bonuses and accolades internally just by having all these alliances hooked up. Like at the one company when I struck the deal with Dell, struck it with Smithsonian, struck it with CNN. Some of those deals I just introduced the concept of alliances. And of course we had other people internally that did all the legwork for that. So the alliance program setup, determine who's going to take the lead. Usually it's somebody in marketing, somebody over in alliances, business development, whoever's going to take the lead. And then the next part is who's going to actually do the legwork. So it's either the lead person or an intern. Decide your objectives. So sometimes companies are happy if I can just find 5 different alliance partners that will fill this hole in my product roadmap, or holes. Complete the Chanimal Alliance Worksheet. Repurpose all this stuff, populate it. And again, this is a complete kit. Okay, how to pick your alliances. Is there a hole in your product? What feature could you add now that would solve your problems? Who's the non-competitor that is targeting the same market? So let's say you're in hardware. Let's say you provide a microphone. Again, let's say who out there would provide any kind of software that might use that microphone? Okay, there's stands, there's singing software, there's teaching, there's teachers out there. Again, they're not competitors to yours, but again, get creative. Think services all the way through, component level, all the way through products that you can OEM and build in or just patch onto your existing product. Okay, and then their resellers can also sell my product. Can I find out what promotion pulls the most leads from them? So you can start to leverage. How are you marketing? And all of a sudden you're like, wow, I never even thought about that. For example, with the singing software, I actually formed an alliance first with somebody that actually made software, MIDI software. And they said one of their strongest alliances was with Korg. And then they gave me the contact for Korg, and I contacted them to strike up a deal to put this software inside the packages that came with their keyboard. And can we both do market development? So can we make the market larger, by our press releases, sort of expand the market itself with overall market development? And then also I take a look at this and say, okay, what alliances do my competitors have? I go and look at their websites. Can I disrupt their exclusivity? Can I create a better alliance and starve them out? Because alliances are utility relationships. The strength of it is determined by how much value you bring to each other. So they're like cats. You give them the milk, and they come to you regularly. And so with this approach, you can take your competitors' alliances, which a lot of those are going to be really shoddy, informal alliances. That's why I say strike them formal and do things proactively with them. And you'll pull all their alliances away. Next thing you go to their website, it has no more alliances. So it's a counter-strike campaign. Does it make sense to work with them? What about legislation to enlarge our market? If you're trying to create lobbyists, maybe all of you could pitch in maybe $5,000 and pay for a $200,000 a year lobbyist to build your entire market. And same thing with different associations. So all these are creative examples. Now here's the acid test for every alliance. Can we make more money together than separately? And that money that we make, is it enough to really justify the alliance? Meaning the opportunity cost of a warm body that's going to be managing this entire program. Okay, the next thing is the alliance program setup. So again, just go through the kit. Many alliances become the channel. Okay, so this means that they can recommend your product, so they're an affiliate partner. They can resell, so they're a reseller. They can OEM your product and build it into theirs, and they can even acquire you, which I've had happen 5 times. Just make sure you have cliff vesting in your agreement. Alliance spreadsheet. So you take a look at that alliance spreadsheet. The first thing you do is you're looking for alliances to complete or complement your product. Then you create the different categories. Let's say, again, I'm going to go back to the singing software so it's not too technical for everybody that's listening in. Okay, on the singing software, you look at microphones, you look at MIDI software, you look at even adapters. Heck, we even had motherboard manufacturers that wanted our software to differentiate theirs because they had a sound card built into their motherboard. And you look at the sound card vendors. So you just get creative and look at the entire overall market, and then each one of those, you categorize each of those, and then within each of those, let's say it's keyboards. You take all your keyboard manufacturers, all the major ones, everything from Steinway all the way to Korg to Roland, and carry it all the way through, and then you prioritize and try and ferret out which one has the greatest market share. A lot of times I'll call it a wholesale distributor and say, which of these is the top seller? I can look on a list, other places where they have that. Because if you have a chance to set up an alliance, why not set it up with the number 1 player versus the number 10 player? Number 10 is going to be anxious to set it up, but see if you can form something strong with somebody that actually, their brand makes your brand sound bigger. I've got an alliance with Sony and with Intel, and you're some little tiny company. Then the next thing you do is, once you've sort of done your homework and you know who you want to target, now you have to, there's another part of the spreadsheet where you create a business case for each of the categories. And so your business case is, for example, like with Panasonic, throw our software in and it increases your value. It doubles the value of your microphone. Wow. Okay. Now they have a reason to talk to you. Do not contact the companies if you have not yet identified the business case. Otherwise, they're going to say, and why are you calling me? Why does this make sense for me? I know it makes sense for you, but why? So you've got to have that answer. And once you have that answer, like, I can throw your software at no cost to you for the cost of, except for the cost of a label to start with. So it's a 50th of a cent, and you've got $50 worth of value thrown into your microphone. Are you interested? They're like, yeah. Then the next thing is find the contacts at each company. Okay, and this is where if you've got some salespeople that have got different databases, there are some databases out there where you can find these. Otherwise, you're going to have to sort of slog through and network and everything else. This is where it's helpful for an intern because it's time consuming. This is what this spreadsheet looks like. Here's the instructions. And then over here, here's the sheet where you put the alliance type. Here's music education software. Here's MIDI and composition software. Here's keyboards. Here's MIDI cables, speakers, and accessories. Here's sound cards. And then here's our benefit. Why should we even form an alliance with them? Here's their benefit. Here's our joint benefits, and here's examples. So this is a sample with the spreadsheet that got, the first thing it says is save a copy of this, create another one, and delete this content. Just dump it out of there. But it gives you a sample of how to set this stuff up. Okay, the next thing you do over here is then you take each of those areas. Once you see, okay, each of these areas, because you usually find if it works for one keyboard vendor, it works for all of them. So now put the keyboard vendors over here, and then, so for example, this up here happens to be MIDI creation. List the different ones down there, list their software down here, list their price point, because you have to speak to their product. You know, if they've got a $20,000 software product and you're going to add $50 of value, it's not quite as compelling. You have to maybe talk about a different value proposition than if it's a $25 software and you can throw $50 of the value at it. And so the business case, just one check, you know, just make sure you got the business case down, right? Okay, and then here's your contact information. You start to go through there and find the contact name, the phone number, the email, all the contact information, when you've contacted them, and start using this as your Alliance worksheet to be able to track all this stuff. Then if you were to continue this spreadsheet through, which is the second half on the bottom, have you signed an NDA? Because you want to talk about nitty-gritty product roadmaps. Have you had your executive meeting to buy off on the Alliance that it makes good business sense? And then there's the Alliance kickoff meeting, which the executive usually doesn't get involved in. That's with marketing, sales, and product management. And then do you have a plan of action? Notice it's got M for marketing, S for sales, and then there should be a P for product. And the product in that particular case would be the label, but the product manager is the one who deals with the bill of materials that goes with that particular product. So he has to be involved. He or she has to be involved in that. Okay, the next tab when you move over is the action item pick list. So what you do is Alliance 1 is, let's say, Korg. Alliance 2 is going to be Panasonic. And so with each one of those, here's like a pick list of things that you should do from a marketing. PR initiatives. Should you do a joint press release? Should you do a case study? Should you do a different types of promotions from a PR perspective? Compare your databases so you can do direct mail campaigns to each other's databases. Your online initiatives. Do you have links to each other's product? Are you listing each other's product in your own stores? Coupons, access to alliances, to their alliances, their direct response. So you just go down through the entire pick list. Marketing does. Sales, compare your resellers, joint sales calls. Like Dell used to go on joint sales calls with us. And then cross-train those sales reps to be able to leverage this alliance. Then the product management. Add the coupons. Possible OEM. Either way. Integrate the roadmaps. Combine the features. So, and there's even more stuff, within the kit itself. These are just the things that I'm displaying. So, once you do this, you want to set up a meeting. And so, here's the elements of an alliance PowerPoint. Meaning, when you're going to have that meeting, even if you send this to them and go through it on the phone, these are the things that you're going to talk about. This agenda, the introductions, and personal introductions, like what's your background and everything else, because sometimes you might find some things in the background. You're forming an alliance, which is a relationship. When I said that they start as utility relationships, they should end as friendships. And so that's why you immediately start to get to understand the people that you're going to be working with, because the eventual strength of the relationship and the alliance is going to be on a personal basis. And also, sometimes these are people that you might acquire the company. You might end up working with these people later. So, and then you talk about why we should form an alliance. So it's the joint business case. So you've already done that homework before you even contacted them. So it's very easy to fill out this PowerPoint. Then the acid test, how we're going to make more money together. And then our alliance process. And when you pull this thing out, they're going to be shocked. They've never seen anything like this, that you're so well organized. And discuss the potential alliance agreement. So then after that, you come up with a plan of action, which the executive level plan of action is really sort of hooking in the rest of your teams. Okay, so recruiting. Remember that adage that I gave you. Do not start until you've developed a compelling business case for you, and an even more compelling case for them. And then you've got to have a list of different ways that you think you can work together. And then there's even an email as part of the template that shows how to take this information, put it in an email to get their attention right off the bat. And again, you contact the product manager at Panasonic and tell him that you can give him free $49 software to teach people to learn how to sing with his microphone, and you've got his attention. And then these over here, again, the initial context, the VPs, the alliance manager, and so forth. I usually try to get as high as I can, because sometimes the people that are actually doing the work don't want any more work. They don't have an intern to help manage the process. But when it gets mandated from a vice president, director, or the CEO that you're going to form this relationship, then the first thing you talk to them about is you might want to change the comp plans for these guys too, so that if they've got a quota for their product, even the product manager, then they have an incentive, even with this other product, to sell these two products together. So there's a couple of things, but that usually goes into the next stage of development within the relationship. But these are additional titles within companies that you should be talking with. Each of these become a beachhead into the corporation to be able to eventually get it so you've got a properly engaged alliance. The next step up here is the executive management. You've got to get that buy-in. The product manager, remember, you want it integrated with their product roadmaps. They know the holes in the product. You want sales to do joint sales calls, cross-training each other, getting the product, getting your resellers converted to each other's products. And if you show them the benefit of that, with that whole analogy of the trees and the roots combined and the branches combined, and that you're stronger together than you are separately, even defensively, sales will even buy up on all of that. And then marketing and communications, joint promotions. So again, I mean, none of this works if you can't execute. So this is all designed to both identify, recruit, and then execute and make more money together than you would otherwise. Otherwise, you just did punitively non-productive work. So the initial call, when you make that, find the right contact, make that business pitch, explain how you're going to leverage each other, see if it makes sense, and if you have enough in common or enough value to proceed to a formal alliance meeting. Then you set up the time for the meeting, and you might involve a single or all four of the different groups, the executive management, sales, product management, and MarCom, as part of this. And I've had some of these where the first meeting is with everybody. Sometimes you don't realize it was the entire company that showed up. And sometimes it's just with the executive that makes the decision, yes, this makes sense. And then you move into the first meeting. So you could do this in person. I've had some of these like at Motorola where people flew in or we flew out. A lot of times you just set it up on the phone. And you follow the agenda, and I've got agendas for the meeting with the executive meeting. I've got samples for the one with marketing, the one with product management, and the one with sales. This is all part of the kit. I mean, everything, it's like when you've done this many times, it's just all done. And then you review the Alliance PowerPoint. This is the one that you present to them. Review your options from that pick list. This is part of your PowerPoint. The sample's got all those things in it. You just strip out what you can't do. Agree to engage. Assign a point person. And then with the point person, that's their alliance manager, essentially the point person that you're going to get in. You want that person to set up a meeting with them and sales, them and the product manager, them and MarCom. Because each of those meetings will then create a plan of action that dictate, and then you put it all onto a schedule, and then I have my interns manage this whole thing. They're bright. Okay, so key, the alliance is formed on mutual value. It's sustained, like I said, through that fruitful working relationship. And I've had alliance people on the other side that a relationship was strong enough, they called up and they said, your competitor is pounding all over us trying to get in here. I'm just letting you know. So you know which competitor it is, so you can create a comparative matrix of their product versus yours and why the company would be a fool to form an alliance with that inferior product. So there's counter-strikes that you can run to try and prevent other people from making inroads. But the key is you've got a relationship built, and you want to maintain it. You don't want a polygamous relationship. So here's the four legs of that stable alliance. Management, more buy-in, that they can make more revenue together. So they mandate that their team has to step in. And you've shown them in your presentation what you require as part of this alliance. You need engagement at these different levels. When they sort of see how this works, they see that that alliance is going to be a lot more stable with 4 points of contact instead of just one, which is just them, which is sort of like, someone just sitting on top of a unicycle that not everybody can make it work. And so again, you've seen this information already, but again, these are the 4 legs that you've got to set up, and that's why we structure it this way. Here's a sample of the sales meeting when you have it with the sales meeting. So you've passed your executive meeting, and now you're going to have a meeting with sales. So see, 5 minutes for personal introductions, sign your NDAs, 10 minutes each, sales department organizations, presentations. And by the way, you always have the other person give their presentation first, because there may be some things that you can say in your presentation that will make it so that they buy off on it better. You can personalize your presentation to them. So when they say, for example, that part of this is to build a reseller channel, then you can say, the nice thing is we've got 1,200 resellers we can add to your database. And they're like, oh, you got my attention. And so they buy in on this. And so because you've got to sell your way through the organization with all 4 points of these, or you end up with a wobbly alliance. So this is an example. Then you discuss the tactics, and you want to create that high-level plan of action. Again, what are you going to do with sales? Okay, we're going to connect. So with Dell, for example, I might look at that and say, okay, I'm going to get a list of your salespeople. I'm going to contact each of the salespeople. I'm going to give them all of their contact information for my local salespeople, and I'm going to have my local salespeople call them up and schedule the first meeting. So it's that level of detail. That's why within this meeting you discuss the high level, then you go back and work out all the details, flesh it out. But it's all part of the Chanimal plan of action anyway. It's all there. Here's MarCom. Here's your product management meeting. Shows the different ways that you might integrate the product. Review each other's product roadmaps to ensure that there's no divergence. And how to promote. Different ways that you can promote. Each of these are designed to tailor it to the specific audience and contact at the alliance. Here's like a pick list, different things that you can do. I showed some of this already, but this is part of your PowerPoint. Shows people how you might work together and how other departments are going to work together. Then everybody sees that it makes sense. Okay, so the key: the alliance must pass the acid test. I'm reading faster than I can speak. You must engage the company on the executive level, the marketing, the sales, and the product management, whenever possible, to ensure that you have a very solid alliance. Connect all 4 groups to their counterpoint. So sales goes to sales, MarCom to MarCom. My MarCom person is going to talk with their MarCom person. We're going to hook these people up. Sure, each group has that meeting to review the alliance. So this is what the alliance manager does, is he goes into project management mode. And he manages this program and makes sure that everybody's connecting, and he or she becomes the facilitator. So again, then we switch it from the utility to the personal relationships, reduce the competitive inroads, and we maximize our possibility of pulling value for the company and even friendships out of these alliances. And I've developed some wonderful alliance friendships over the years, and some of those people we end up working together. Other times I end up seeing them, at conferences, and I'm speaking in the same meeting that they are. So here's some expectations. Okay, you're going to form these alliances. They're going to fill the holes in your roadmap. You're going to recruit hundreds or even thousands of resellers. I've even got one right now that's talking with a major hardware vendor where they might be able to pick up several thousand resellers, and the hardware vendor is excited to have them on board because their software makes the other company's hardware work better. Then you get free booth space at a trade show. I've done that. Cut your direct mail cost in half because we both contribute to it. I've also had a friendly acquisition, like I've mentioned, 5 of those. Double your capabilities because, again, you can split the work out. It's harder for your customers to rip you guys out when you've got all these other products that you're integrated with. Discover an alternative channel to sell your product, get free exposure. So you look at all of these like, good grief, what's holding you back? I mean, you'd be a fool not to consider creating formalized alliances, which is why even as part of my channel strategy, I recommend it to everybody. And by the way, I'm going to be sending you guys a big pile of material afterwards. These two different email attachments. And with that, go ahead and send me an email, or on this email right here. Make sure that I'm part of your whitelist. so that you can receive these attachments. Otherwise, you look in your spam. These will be sent hopefully within the next 30 minutes right after this particular webinar. And that's it for now. Thank you very much. Bye.